take a lot of input from so many different stakeholders that you're saying. And it's definitely not something that any of us, one, would have seen before, never mind anticipated. I remember saying that there are things that are happening now that if you had asked me in November of 2019, would they be possible? I'd say, no way, there's no way we could just like lock down the entire country and stop people from coming, and like it just didn't even seem possible. But given the circumstances, I do think that the decisions that were made, for the most part, have been one of the main reasons that we have seen such a response to it. Not having, like you said, the deaths and the number of cases, and managing to keep this level of community spread to a point where we, one, understand the virus a bit more, and also, have a vaccine that is another layer of protection for us moving forward. But even prior to this community spread and, the restrictions that we are under now, one of the things that we would have seen happening in Nevis is the innovation. We saw the production of masks and stuff like that. At a time...
All because...
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying that your voice is fading in and out, so I don't know if it's on my end or yours.
Oh, okay.
But
okay.
Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, we're hearing you clear now. We're hearing you clear now.
Okay.
But basically, I was getting to the need for innovation and diversification as we try to figure out the way forward in the short term and hopefully in the long term. How do you see, what areas do you think as a nation we should be looking to try and not only help us get through this, but also bolster our resistance to something like this happening again in the future?
Well, the truth be told, that this pandemic, I think, exposed the fickle nature of tourism as a mainstay of our economy. But I'm not going to be like some and attack the tourism industry. I think it will continue to be a significant player in the economies of all of the Caribbean, because the Caribbean has some natural advantages when it comes to tourism. We're a very beautiful place, beautiful beaches, beautiful weather. So tourism will continue to be important. I think what we must now, however, do is to understand that it cannot be the only egg in the basket. We have to now, as I like to say, have additional strings to our bow. So absolutely, I think tourism will continue to be relevant. What we are trying to do in Nevis now is to see how we can stimulate other activity. So, for example, financial services is an area that we feel has growth potential. International banking, trusts, international business companies. Once, of course, they're properly regulated and accord with all international standards in terms of due diligence and regulation and know your client, know your customer requirements. I think that that's a potential area. Citizenship by investment, I think, will continue to be relevant. Once again, that is carefully managed and the due diligence procedures are adhered to ensure that no bad actors are allowed into our system. I think domestically, we have to pivot, as we've done very hard in Nevis, towards agriculture and greater food security. And not talking about agriculture in the traditional sense, meaning that our sense of agriculture, certainly on the island, is an old man with a donkey going up in the mountains and coming back with some yams. I'm talking about agriculture in a more commercial sense. And I'm very pleased in Nevis to see a lot of young university graduates, a lot of young people getting into agriculture, but using technology. So a lot of people now are using hydroponics, they're using shade houses, and they're producing high quality food. One of my greatest fears when we started to lock down was that the United States would close the port of Miami. Because if that had happened, St Kitts and Nevis would have been in a serious problem when it comes to food. Because we go to the supermarket, we take it for granted, but every single week those containers come in from Miami. And if tropical had stopped coming, or Crowley or whatever they call had stopped coming, and those containers had stopped coming, we would have had a serious crisis on our hands. And so very early on, somewhere about March of last year, we decided that we would take whatever little stimulus we could afford and put it towards the agricultural sector. And we extended it not only to traditional farmers or commercial farmers, we also extended it to what we call backyard farmers. So people in Nevis got free seeds, free seedlings, free fencing, free land preparation, free fertilizer. We provided some with labor. We gave them free water. And I think people have responded in a very positive way. If you come to Nevis now, you see all across the island these stalls that have popped up, like pop-up vegetable stalls, fruit stalls. And it's really a good look, in my view, and something that I think we ought to continue to encourage. We incentivize our fisher folk as well, gave them free fish pot wire. We incentivize our animal farmers, gave them free feed. All of this, of course, came at a price, but it was a price we thought was necessary to ensure greater food security. And we are hopeful that as we look towards the future, that food security, food processing, value added, that all of these will become part and parcel of our new economic matrix for the island and for the country. We are also looking at things like a poultry industry. The Minister of Agriculture, as you know, is Alexis Jeffers, who's also the Minister of Agriculture here in Nevis. He's the Minister of Agriculture federally, and he's very gung-ho about getting a poultry industry. It might surprise many of you to know that we actually eat more chicken than fish in St Kitts and Nevis. And it sounds surprising because we're surrounded by ocean. So you would expect that fish would be the thing, but fish is actually more expensive than chicken.
Right.
So we eat a lot of chicken, but we don't produce any, or we don't produce it in quantities that make it viable. And so these are things I think that we can look to create viable industries here, if for nothing else to feed ourselves. And then, of course, with the prospect of exporting either throughout the OECS or through CARICOM through our trade agreements with them. I'm not even thinking about exporting globally. I'm thinking just within our region, we should be able. And we have some, as I said, inbuilt advantages. You look at something like mangoes, for example. We make jokes about it all the time. But Nevis is naturally blessed with over 40 varieties of mangoes. We know that neighboring islands, St. Martin, Anguilla, the Dutch islands, St. Bart's, those do not have, Antigua, the same quantity that we have, the same quality perhaps that we have. And so here you have an inbuilt advantage, which if it can be leveraged and commercialized, you can have a product that is uniquely an envisioned product that goes out to these countries as well. I won't bother with St. Kitts because we won't sell to you, we'll give you mangoes over there. But certainly I think that, these are little ideas perhaps, but if, taken on board, that I think they can bear some fruit. We've also on Nevis looked to incentivize the construction industry. We've pretty much removed all VAT, all import duties, etc., on construction materials to incentivize people here to build. Why we did that is because we realized that there were a lot of people who were saving up to build at some point in the future. And we know that taxes are a significant part of the price buildup. And so we said, if we can encourage you to build now by removing some of those taxes and generate some activity, particularly employment in the country, how will you respond? And we have been pleasantly surprised. People have responded very, very positively. I want to thank the banks that have clearly facilitated a lot of this, but also individuals who have said, hey, this is the right time for me to own a home, and I'm going to do something. We also did something interesting. We extended it to people who are renovating their homes. So if you wanted to add on or to do some repairs or some renovations or some improvements, we also extended those concessions to you. We have also been working very closely with film producers. We first met with film producers, MSR Media, in December of last year via Zoom. And they took a chance on us and we took a chance on them. And they came to Nevis in January. And since then, under a 2-picture deal, they have really performed creditably. They have honored their commitments to us. They have completed those 2 films that they said they would do. One year off, a romantic comedy. Second one called Assailant, which is some kind of thriller. Both have been done. And they are now in the midst of filming a 3rd movie, a romance story called 1 Week in Paradise. And that is now under a new 3-year deal that we've negotiated with them, that they will produce 3 to 6 movies per year over the next 3 years. Now that I think is significant because we have talked about a film industry for a long time, but nobody has actually done anything about it. And I'm very proud that my government has been able to bring this into Nevis initially, but we have said to them, of course, that St. Kitts and Nevis, one country, has a lot to offer. I take Brimstone Hill in St. Kitts as an example. I don't think there's any site in the country as impressive as that site. And I think, as we think about these things, we consider how amazing it would be to have a Brimstone Hill featured in some feature film somewhere, to see, Christophe Harbour, to see, all the beauty that St. Kitts has to offer, as well as Nevis. So we really offer two islands, as we like to say, one paradise. And we offer two islands in a very unique way, because you take other Twin Island countries, Trinidad and Tobago, Antigua and Barbuda, the proximity is far less. And so as a consequence, St. Kitts and Nevis, with only 2 miles of ocean, allows people to move seamlessly. Right. So you can literally have a movie industry that is based on Nevis, as it is at this point, but which is filming in St. Kitts. And I was very happy that 1 year off, for example, starts with a scene at Salt Plage on St. Kitts. So the idea really is that even though it has started here in Nevis, is to see it expand outwards and become a national effort. There were actors from St. Kitts that were part of that movie, Matrix. We've also started an acting academy on Nevis, which we think, again, is looking down the road, value added. And we are, of course, if the folks in St. Kitts are interested, they have acting classes at NEPAC. And the idea, again, is to have a cadre of actors here, so that when people come in, they don't have to import all that talent. There's local talent available.
Right.
But more than that, for me, what has been significant is the number of young people. I think they have a crew now of over 80, and a lot of young people here are now in the movie business. And over the past 6 months, are learning the intricacies of movie production, lighting, filming, editing, makeup, hair, costume. And I'm very impressed with that, because again, as you try to build out this sector and this new sort of, new look to our economy, we're going to need our people on board. And the best way
Yeah, it seems as though the internet been kicking us down to the bar.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And important, but we need to add, I think, to tourism, so that it is no longer the only thing that's available to us.
Right. I mean, it's good to see that that is definitely on the mind of your administration, the diversification of the economy and making us, in essence, more resilient to similar situations moving forward. You spoke about the food security, which is one that I know it's a big concern, not only for yourself but a lot of people. Even though I still have a love affair with Nevis. Even though Nevis, a blue runner poison me from over there a couple of months ago, but I won't blame that on the people of Nevis explicitly. So
are you not the blue runner who was from over here?
Well, the fisherman was from over there, so I don't know.
You ate it over here. It doesn't mean it was from over here.
Yeah, but again, I don't blame the people of Nevis for that one. Still love y'all, but it's really good to see even and I know this is something that all of us here in studio are passionate about, the expansion into media and entertainment, and so hopefully that continues to grow, and we really see some local talent being developed and exported as a result.
Yes.
But we had some comments here on the show concerning the announcements that were made on the weekend. First, we had the Prime Minister coming out and speaking about when he announced the lockdown. What are we calling it now? The lockview?
The lockview.
Yeah.
Lockview.
But and then we had again the AG who came out on Saturday and started to try and clarify some of the questions that people were having. And then I think it was on Sunday or
Sunday.
On Sunday you came and made clarified what was happening in Nevis at the time, which was a question for even myself, recognizing that the situation in Nevis would have been, to our knowledge, a bit different to what was happening in St. Kitts. But I think the question for a lot of people was, why was there that seemingly, like, why was it not something that was announced initially by the Prime Minister? Is it that negotiations were still happening, decisions were still being made? Because those questions would have come up on Friday as well when he made his speech. So,
well, I think I would look at it this way, that this is an ongoing work. It's a work in progress. And anybody who tells you that they have all the answers at once is perhaps lying to you. The situation is evolving. COVID is a very fluid situation. I made my address, for example, on Saturday evening, speaking to the situation on the ground in Nevis. By Monday evening, we had a case.
Right, exactly.
That's how fluid the situation is. So we can only respond to the evidence that's available to us and make decisions as leaders on the advice that we have at that time. And so you're absolutely correct. The Honorable Prime Minister would have spoken on Friday. The Honorable Attorney General came on Saturday morning, and he would have spoken. And I would have spoken to the situation on Nevis, being on the ground in Nevis, on Saturday evening. If you would realize that I think it was only yesterday we would have promulgated even further restrictions and the state of emergency, limited state of emergency was declared. And also, of course, we would have repealed and replaced the SRNO that was discussed by the Attorney General on Saturday. So here he was on Saturday morning discussing a set of regs, and by Tuesday, those had been repealed and replaced. So I said that only to say that while I appreciate some level of consternation in the public, we also have to appreciate that this is a fluid situation, and that as new and better evidence comes to light, we adjust. And that's why, my own address, even though I said at that point, Saturday evening, there were no cases in Nevis since March 16th, that we have to be prepared that if cases were to come, then additional actions would become necessary. So that was what it was. Ideally, it would have been excellent had the Prime Minister on Friday said all that needed to be said. But the truth is that even by Saturday and Sunday and again into Monday, the situation on the ground kept changing. So I anticipate that this will be something we'll have to live with, where we will see additional changes, maybe additional restrictions, or easing of those restrictions, as the case may be, as we move forward.
Yeah, I think that's something that sometimes the population isn't. Hindsight is 2020, and in the moment, it's difficult for you. It's like yesterday, talking to a friend of mine, and he telling me, wait, to me, they're premature with some of these things. I said, but bro, if you propose to the love of your life on Tuesday and set a wedding for 3 months from now, but 2 months from now, you found out she may have been, it's new information, and you adjust as you go.
It's not. I don't think this is a program for confessions. I think you should leave that for off here.
Watch it. It's burning me, and I'm gonna get it off my chest. Okay.
But ideally, would you like to see the next few months looking like when it comes to this COVID situation? What plans would you have for the people of Nevis? Because I know they're looking at you like, okay, he's been leading us thus far. It seems to be in the right direction. What do you tell people like to look out for in the upcoming months?
Well, we are in a situation. I think that's an excellent question. We're in a situation where, in a very real way, our future lies in our hands. This is not now only up to the government. This is up to every person out there, every young person, every not so young person, every citizen and every resident. Because we have been told by the doctors and by the science that the vaccine is the answer to COVID-19. And we have, of course, a tremendous level of vaccine hesitancy still in the community. I confess that it took me by surprise, because having seen the suffering of people out of work, no incomes, for over a year, I thought as soon as the vaccine came, we would run out very quickly, that people would be scrambling to get vaccines because this is the answer. Instead, you have people, in fact, I'll give you a real example. A young man was seeking work, and we found something for him to do because somebody had left the service, and this was an offer made to this young person. And I thought it was a good thing to get a young person in. Turns out he's not vaccinated. And so we said to him, could you get vaccinated, because the role requires you to interact in a very direct way with members of the public. And this was somebody who was harassing daily, seeking work, saying, things are bad, desperate. And do you know he turned down the job because he refused to be vaccinated?
Wow.
And when you ask him, well, is there medical reason? Is there a religious reason? No reason. He just not take none. And you get that. So it is difficult for me as the Premier of Nevis to say where we're going to be in 3 months unless our people come to a realization that where we're going to be is in a very real way dependent on them.
Mm-hmm.
People who are saying I'm out of work and the Four Seasons has laid off some 400 or so people. How do I get back my job at the Four Seasons? You can only get back that job if Four Seasons is full again, if the island is open again, if people no longer have to quarantine. That is how you get back your job. But the same people who are saying, I want a job, are saying they're not going to do what is necessary to put the island in a place where the island, and let me extend it to say the country, can reopen. And so I think that our people need to step up. A lot of the negativity, a lot of the conspiracy theories. A man told me the other day that if he take the vaccine, his body's going to turn into a magnet.
Wow.
I said, a magnet? He said, yeah. Things just going to stick to him. He can't take that because he read it somewhere on Google. And so the reality
but
is
to me that seemed like a plus. I like Magneto.
I don't know. But that is the kind of thing that you're getting from people. You're getting some religious leaders out there saying, oh, this is the mark of the beast that was foretold in Revelation. And, and let us be blunt. All of us on this program today have been vaccinated. All. Our parents took us when we were a few months old to the clinics to get our shots, right? Some of us have dogs that have got their shots. And we take them and we don't even bat an eyelid. We go as young parents, we take our children for their shots. We don't ever ask what's in that vaccine. What are you giving my child? What's in it? Because the reality is that we have had this shared experience where vaccines work. Vaccines have eliminated things like polio and tuberculosis from St Kitts and Nevis. I went to Senegal a few years ago, and we went to a place called Gorée Island, very spiritual experience because it was where they shipped slaves from. So they had this thing called the Door of No Return. Mm-hmm. But the guide was someone who was so knowledgeable, so articulate, but he was very, very badly crippled. And in giving him a little tip to thank him, I asked him what had happened, and he said he had polio as a child, and polio resulted in his body really being badly deformed. And I look at that and I say, we are so grateful and fortunate here in St. Kitts and Nevis that I'm sure none of you, I'm 52 years old, and I have never heard of polio existing here.
Right.
And that is because all of us get that polio shot and we move on. So all of a sudden you find that there are these people out there who are preaching this doom and gloom about vaccination, and in a very real way are keeping us back, holding us back from being able to open up the country, get the economy going again, and get people back to work. And so our people who are out of work, our people who are looking work, our people who are complaining, our small business community, etc., all of them have to now take a personal decision about where we see ourselves and where we want to be in that 3-month timeline that you have said. Now, if I'm optimistic, I will say to you that my hope is that our people will go out, our people will get vaccinated, we will get our numbers up to a point where we are comfortable enough to open our borders and open our doors in the way that we were hitherto accustomed, and that will allow our hotel plant, our restaurants, our tour operators, our cruise ships, and those who depend on it, our taxi drivers, once again to earn. And if that were to happen, I think the other things that I raised earlier of the reorienting of the economy to get other strings to our bow, I think that could only add up value. But our people have to step up. It is not just the government. Someone rang me yesterday, real story, and said to me that they were encouraging a lady to vaccinate. That lady is politically aligned with, well, let me put it this way. She's not a supporter of my party. I don't know who she's aligned with. She's not a supporter of my party. And the lady said in response to the plea to be vaccinated, I am not going to vaccinate for Mark Brantley.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was her response.
We've been having similar rhetoric here too. Yeah.
I am not going to vaccinate for Mark Brantley. But I am vaccinated. Mark Brantley is fully vaccinated. So you look at that, and then you look at the knock-on now, because when individuals fall sick, when, God forbid, they get ill and need to be hospitalized, it's the same Mark Brantley and the government. You say, oh, you need more ventilators, you need more beds, you need more this, you need more that. And you now have to get all the resources now diverted to try and cure people who had in their hands a preventative mechanism that they refused to use. Now, I'm not talking here about the people who have a strong religious view or the people who have a medical condition. I'm talking about that broad mass of people who are simply saying, I don't care what nobody tells me, I'm not doing it. But then want to be relieved of the consequences of their decision. And still want to come and tell you, oh, WINN FM, I'm not vaccinating, but you can't stop me from coming to work. But WINN FM has a duty to have a workplace that is safe and secure for its workers. So if you're going to come to WINN FM and tell WINN FM that, you're going to come to TDC or Hosfords or whoever and tell them, listen, I have my right and I will exercise my right in this way. And you say, absolutely, you have your right. But does the business place not also have its rights? The company not also have its rights to protect itself and protect its employees? Do you realize that if one person, I'm picking on WINN FM, but if one person at WINN FM were to become ill with COVID, that WINN FM has to shut down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who's going to compensate WINN FM when they have to close down? So a lot of our people out there just talking, but they're not actually thinking about the consequences of the decisions that they're taking. Everybody's hyped up about, oh, I got my rights, I got my rights. Absolutely, you have your right. But others have rights too. And you cannot exercise your rights in a way that negatively impacts somebody else. Why should you exercise your right in such a way that an entire company, entire business has to close its doors?
Right.
Because you say you have your right. And this is, I think, the reality. So when we talk about 3 months out, it is difficult to predict. I'm hopeful that our people will see these challenges. I mean, I hear things, we have a massive outbreak on St Kitts. We are now seeing on Nevis 1 case thus far. We don't know what today and tomorrow will hold for Nevis. But an outbreak in the country. So let me not separate the islands. An outbreak in the country of St Kitts and Nevis, right? And do you know there are people out there saying this is fake news? Government make up this thing just to try and frighten people. As if what we see on our televisions every day from all around the world, what the deaths that have been mentioned, the suffering. You know, when I looked at India and saw that people couldn't even hold their loved ones because of the infectious nature of this disease, that bodies were just being cremated. And I look at our people who have this very lackadaisical, blasé attitude as if it can't happen to me. And then when it happens, they start to cry out. To who? The same government. And said to you, oh, you must come and save me. But how about doing something to save yourself now and protect yourself now? And allow the country to breathe again. Allow us to move forward together. That to me is what is important. There are mothers out there with young children. We know that the children fall outside the vaccination group and therefore are vulnerable. Parents, let me not just emphasize mothers and fathers, parents. And yet they refuse to vaccinate. And so there's a risk, heightened risk to their families that they can take home. A risk to their elderly family members, risk to family members who have underlying conditions. And so our people need at this point to be more responsible and to step up and understand that this is not a joke, that lives and livelihoods depend on their actions. And so I end where I started, that this lies in every sense in our own hands. As government, we can only do so much. And I believe we have done what we could do We have talked, we have encouraged, we have made the vaccines available. We took hard decisions very early in terms of lockdowns. We spent a lot of political capital. We did things that were not popular, but it has thus far kept us safe. And through the grace of God, we have no deaths. But sometimes, and I hate to voice this, but I will say so because sometimes I wonder if our people want to see people die. Because only then it will come home that this is real, that this is not a joke, this is not a game, that this is real. Because I don't know what else it's going to require. I truly don't know what else.
Right. But I know Kevon, you had a question.
Yeah. So, we were talking about what we don't know what the next 3 months holds. So if cases continue to spike, how will that sort of affect the contract that Nevis has with making movies? Do you have any idea what that would look like? I know it's difficult to say because you can't predict what's happening, but
it is difficult to say, but I think that if cases continue to rise and if we go back into a sort of hard lockdown, everything is going to be affected. The hotels are going to close again. The borders are going to close again. And clearly everything is going to have to stop. We're going to go back to where we were in March of last year, at a time when really we should have been focused on reopening the country at this point. We're already having discussions. In fact, I think the Honorable Prime Minister already signaled that October was his date that he had in mind to reopen our doors, because we had anticipated that through the vaccination effort, our people would have been in a position by then, the country would have been in a position by then to be as safe as possible. So I heard Dr. Cameron Wilkerson use terminology the other day, which I quite liked. He said that we must vaccinate ourselves out of this crisis. And he's absolutely correct. That is the answer. That is the only answer that we have available to us now, or we will continue to live this very abnormal life of lockdowns and curfews and physical distancing, where you can't even greet someone in church. It's an odd way for humans to live. But we know that this virus has to be stopped, and the only way we can stop it is to stop moving and stop contact among people. And so if cases continue to rise, we have no choice. We have to go into a hard lockdown, and everybody suffers. I'm not only talking about the financial and economic suffering, I'm also talking about the mental and psychological trauma that it causes for people. So all of these are very real situations that we have to deal with. And I think that our country needs to wake up. I think people are seeing this as a government problem. Let the government solve it. It's not a government problem. It's a national problem. It's a national problem. And I think as people start to recognize that, listen, this is not just about the government, because whichever government, whichever party was in government, they would have the same problem. We have to get it right. And there's no room here for me to politicize this particular issue, because it is important that we get together and we make it happen. I hear, for example, some leaders in Nevis, rather than getting on board and trying to assist in moving us forward, they say, we're in favor of vaccination, but we're not telling anybody to vaccinate or not to vaccinate. You guys are younger than me, your brains are more nimble. If you can understand that position from a leadership perspective, then please let me know. We're in favor of vaccination, but we're neither encouraging people to vaccinate or not to vaccinate. So basically, we're sitting on the fence. But the country now doesn't need people sitting on the fence. The country needs people to roll up their sleeves and help. And that's why I say this is not a governmental problem. It's a national problem. And we have to find ways to deal with it as such.
Yeah.
Right. I get what you're saying. And we'll just have to wait and see, continue to do what we can in terms of encouraging people to do what's necessary for us to be able to move forward. Jade?
Mr. Brantley has said a mouthful. I hope the people of Nevis and St Kitts were listening and they understand that the crisis that we're facing, as you said, is a we problem right now. It's not a governmental problem. We all have to do our part, because the government can mandate and talk and say we need to do these things, but we have to implement them. We have to wear our masks, we have to sanitize, we have to distance, we have to take a little break from our gatherings as such for, the next 2 weeks, because if we already annoyed by being inside now, imagine if this has to be extended for another 2 weeks and then a month because we can't get the cases under control. Imagine if our hospitals start being affected by this problem. Like, we can't afford these things at all.
Right. I mean, yeah, and again, we really want to thank you for taking the time and coming and speaking to us today. I think it was very informative, and of course, based on what you said, there's a lot going on, a lot to consider, so taking the time out. I do have one last question, though, and it was based on something that I read the other day. I want to know, because, again, I love my brothers and sisters in Nevis. I'm just a little upset I can't get my food on the boat now from my friends over there, but, you know, we understand the times we live in. We understand.
It's the same food that poisoned you before?
No, see, what happened was I should have eaten the food, and I went elsewhere.
I see.
But the question is, stand with Nevis. So we standing with Nevis for what, against what, for who, and against who? So we see the hashtag. So we want to know what we're going on with that.
You standing doesn't mean you're standing against. Okay. It means that you're standing. And what I have been saying is that, in fact, I'm happy that you raised this hashtag, because I think that is absolutely true. That all that I've just said can be condensed into stand with Nevis, stand with St Kitts, stand with St Kitts Nevis. We have to take some personal responsibility and stand up. This is our country. And we're either going to allow it to die and continue into a perpetual state of lockdowns and reopening, and we become like polar bears, we go into hibernation and then we come back out, or we're going to stand up. And part of standing up now is standing up for our country. You know, I recall that in times of war, they actually have what they call the draft. You don't actually have a choice, you know. You're drafted into the military because the country is at stake. You have to go to fight for your country.
Right.
So standing up in a very real way means standing up for your country, standing up for the island of Nevis, standing up for the island of St Kitts, and getting us to a position where we can reopen our country and we can have our way of life back. I don't know about you, but I miss Music Festival. I miss, Culturama.
Right.
I miss those things. I really can't dance so good, but I used to enjoy the long jam from Gingerland to town. In St Kitts, I stood on the side and watched the people dancing in the troops. I used to enjoy it. I'm sure I've seen a few of you in the troops.
Well,
I tend to be the sober guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to be the sober guy on the side of the road watching, the debauchery on the road. But all of us miss that. We miss that. We miss our way of life. And, so standing up is standing up and saying, guys, listen, let's done with all the chatter and the foolish talk and the weary, and let's get to it. Let's do what we need to do to get the country back. And that, to me, is important. When a hurricane hits, everybody comes out with their cutlass and their electric saws and whatever, and they do what they need to do, get the roads cleaned up, get the community cleaned up. You don't sit back and say, oh, it's government. You roll up your sleeves and you get involved. That's standing up. And I think right now we need to encourage our people to step up, to stand up for their country. That, to me, is absolutely important. So I'm not saying you're standing against anything. I'm saying you're standing for something.
All right, man. I appreciate that. But time is fast spent, and we're going to have to bring this to an end, unfortunately. It's always a pleasure when you come and hang out with us here on Island Tea. Hopefully things change enough so that you could be live with us in studio at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future.
And bring us some food from Nevis.
You're going to eat it,
Yeah, I would. I wasn't the one with the issue, Nevis food.
All right, well, thank you all very much for having me. I really, really enjoyed this. And, whenever you need me in the future, just let me know.
All right, man. I appreciate it so much.
Okay.